Well, hello, my name is Jason T. Ingram. A few people, might remember me better as Fake Zappa, and I am a multimedia artist, and I'm based in Oregon, and I'm open about living with mental disorders, and I try to do activism and fun stuff in order to share my story and try to raise awareness about all this stuff that's been going on in the media. And I would like to talk about how mental illness is portrayed in movies and television and how things are changing and how things are pretty much staying the same. I've made some observations. There was a couple of movies that specifically dealt with bipolar disorder. And one was a true story and portrayed this bipolar, and it focused more on kind of how he made everybody else suffer. And I realized it was written by the main character's daughter in real life. Well, that makes sense, yeah, because that's the impression that folks have of people like me that live with these kind of disorders. And that's a very common impression that people have because most people don't live with these disorders. We just see what happens when we're around certain people and then we try to fill it in. And then there are stories that, for instance, this one here, Love and Mercy, is the story of Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. And this movie really showed in depth the kind of suffering that he went through. Another one is, A Beautiful Mind and stuff like that. A lot of the folks seem to focus on not just mood disorders, but like schizoaffective disorders and some more of the delusional type stuff too. One of the things about Sheldon Cooper is that he is a character that takes center stage in the most popular or the most famous at this time, at least they claim that, The Big Bang Theory is called the number one sitcom, and according to CBS, probably. But it's my favorite sitcom, and I'm kind of obsessed with it. I'm not a big fan. I don't buy stuff from them, well, except for this, which they didn't even make. But I've been watching it now for about 6 years, and I'm really excited that they're doing their first spin-off. And I had this idea a year or so ago, and I don't like to rate CBS and these companies because they really could care less about fans and what their opinions are. But I think it'd be really funny if they did have a spin-off called The Shamey, and it would be, their platonic relationship, except for maybe, a fuck every now and again, maybe just to make kids or something. They could have a lot of fun showing Sheldon and Amy in the future and focusing on their relationship and making a family when they're older and stuff. Maybe they'll do that later. I mean, Seth MacFarlane had a couple of spin-offs and now he's still doing shows. And if someone's successful, they just keep running these things. But I find this interesting that this particular sitcom deals with a subculture that most television shows don't want to deal with, and that's the nerdy, geeky, scientific community. And most people that I know that are sciencey, geeky, intellectual, nerdy type, especially men, don't like the Big Bang Theory. I mean, they really don't like it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's non-sciencey people like me who view nerdy, geeky people like that. And of course, it's Hollywood, it's complete exaggeration, and it's stereotypes. For instance, one of the stereotypes I find funny is the fact that all the nerdy type characters don't, especially the men, just don't seem to make any references about music. Do they listen to music? Do they know what bands are? Do they, And so here's Penny that comes along, and I kind of feel like her sometimes because I'm kind of this hillbilly at heart. I've lived in middle America and in the South long enough to pick up a lot of backwoods manners and stuff like that. And so I would feel a little bit like her, her being in entertainment and them being in science and her having to just kind of speak some common sense into them. And at the same time, I can relate to, well, especially Leonard's parents for in like half of the characteristics that Leonard's character, his parents have is like the way I grew up. So I can't relate to Sheldon's upbringing except for the fact that I spent my 20s and beyond in born again Christian circles. And so when he makes these references to being in the American South and being around fundies and Bible culture and him being intellectual and trying to survive in that culture, I think was something I could relate to as well. And Amy's interesting because I think Amy's character makes more references to really horrible abuse. I mean, being locked in the closet and, I mean, these horrible things like that. And you rarely see characters in sitcoms that make reference to, like, heavily traumatic events like that. So it's like, sometimes I see The Big Bang Theory and I'm like, did they really just do that? One thing I'd like to see in The Big Bang Theory is more gay stuff. You know, they make gay references like most sitcoms do, but because they're focusing on so many subcultures, and also the nerd culture, and like I've got so many friends in the gay community that are like the nerd gay community, and I would love for them to do more stuff with the nerdy part of the gay subcultures. But anyways, I'd like to do something fun here called Fun with, well, not fun with flags, maybe fun with Fag-Flags. Fun with fags. So this is, and I actually got this from a church person when I was involved in some gay activism 3 years ago, and I love it. So this is my Pride American flag, desecrating the sacred flag of the United States and turning it into a beautiful rainbow of flavors of diversity and all the good things that us liberals claim to do. So in this series, I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff. One of the things I'm calling Everybody Loves Rain Man. And I think there's a certain mentality that goes with mentally ill people, is that most people find them annoying, and most people don't listen to mentally ill people unless they do something really extraordinary. And most mentally ill people I know are not the beautiful mind type. They're not the kind that can memorize phone books or maybe, you know, listen to a piece of music one time and play it verbatim, or, you know, figure out these Stephen Hawking type equations. Most disabled people aren't that brilliant, and most of us get so marginalized that even if there is some brilliant people out there, it's weird. It's almost like luck. And there's another thing too, is that with Sheldon's character, I mean, he had an opportunity as a kid to go to college or something like that. And so there's another thing too, is that if somebody has an educational status, or if they're put into some type of arts and entertainment and they live with a mental illness, then that's another way that people can say, okay, I accept this mentally ill person. They drive me crazy, but they can do all this cool shit, so I guess they're okay in my world. And that's another kind of misconception I think a lot of people have. Now, for me, I was not at all a science genius. I don't even remember taking a science class. I remember visiting it, or maybe it was just that I skipped all of them and I attended one session. But I love science, and it's funny how many references they make to all these scientific things that I like to Google and I like to learn about stuff, because I'm like, I never heard of that, you know, particular scientist or reference or something like that. So it's really great to be able to have a show like that that's really well written and well acted, and at the same time it has the same fucking cookie cutter 30-minute sitcom thing as all these other ones, and they just happen to do it pretty well, and so that's cool. So here's something I wanted to get at, is what if the character of Sheldon Cooper wasn't brilliant? What if he was simply annoying? And why is he annoying? Why are people in his particular? He's probably I. It's hard to diagnose characters because they're made up. However, he definitely has some developmental issues because um, that character developed really in advanced ways mentally, but in social ways he didn't, especially with peers. And I can relate to that. I can't relate to being a genius. I've had maybe two people call me that in my life, um, and it was because of music. So I call myself hyper creative, and so I could kind of go up there with a lot of adults when it came to doing music and art and a lot of things as a kid. I couldn't relate to peers very much, especially when I started high school was when I started losing friends every year. It was like uh, I ended up with no friends by the end of high school, and that was partly just because I was trying to cope with a brain that didn't work in a society that wouldn't accept me. And luckily, I was in a very creatively nurturing environment. I wasn't in a very safe place for mentally ill people. However, I can't imagine being in any other community than being in an alternative school. So that was pretty cool. That oh, my cat is shaking. Kiska, my cat is shaking my camera right now. Kiska, come here. She's being a brat because uh, she thinks I'm talking on the phone, and I'm not. I'm talking to cyberspace. Say hi, kitty. This is my therapy cat. And so everybody loves Rain Man. If you remember that Dustin Hoffman movie with the guy who had, I don't know if it was Asperger's, it was just some kind of autism where he could memorize things and count things really quickly and, you know, counting cards and all that. So it was kind of like, oh, I got to take care of my mentally ill relative or my, you know, estranged brother. Oh, but he's of use to me because he could cheat at cards, you know, kind of a thing. So, what about the mentally ill people that don't have a special gift, so to speak, in this world? And here's the thing, they don't have a lot of visibility. If somebody is mentally ill and they don't have some extraordinary gift, they just are ignored. I mean, they're just kind of swept under the carpet. And I hang out with these people a lot because I go to like, you know, mental health hangout centers and stuff like that. And they're not full of geniuses. They're just full of people that most people don't understand and can't hang around with. And most people that aren't peers feel threatened by people like us. And so, anyways, I was thinking, what if the character of Sheldon Cooper wasn't a scientific genius? He would have probably ended up staying a born again Christian. And I've observed this because in Bible culture, it's very weird how they seem to be more tolerant of difficult people, and mentally ill people are generally more difficult to be around. And it's really easy for a lot of mentally ill people to adopt a biblical worldview, except if you're a scientist, it's very hard, except if you go into creation scientist type stuff. So basically what I'm saying here is that I think the way they portray this Dr. Sheldon Cooper character on TV is actually pretty good when it comes to portraying mental illness and going deep into his character, and it shows some of the suffering he goes through, which is also pretty rare. They don't show it a lot, but I mean, in this movie, you can really tell that Brian Wilson is suffering. I mean, it's just really written from his perspective, and I love that. And you don't see that very much in those kind of biopics. But here's the thing, is that if the character Sheldon Cooper wasn't a genius, how would he have ended up? And I think about stuff like that sometimes. So anyways, I'm going to talk again, and Young Sheldon is premiering next week, so I'm really glad about that, and I want to talk more about that stuff. And there's cat fur everywhere. So